The metallic click of a pistol echoed through the marble conference room, just as two armed capos slammed an overweight maid onto her knees. Only minutes earlier, Damian Moretti, the man every crime family feared more than the law itself, had discovered that over $60 million had vanished from one of the 4 unlimited black cards he had personally handed out. Every financial record pointed to the quiet housemaid who spent most of her days polishing floors and serving coffee. Without hesitation, Damian ordered her arrest. The guards tightened their grip, convinced the case was already closed. Then the maid slowly raised her head, glanced once around the room, and spoke with unsettling calm. "If these handcuffs stay on for another 10 minutes, the man who sold your empire will escape forever." The room fell silent, but not because anyone believed her. It was because, for the first time in years, Damian hesitated.
Damian Moretti had spent 20 years building an empire that reached far beyond New York's skyline. On paper, he was the owner of shipping companies, luxury hotels, investment firms, and construction groups that employed thousands of people. Behind the polished boardrooms and billion-dollar contracts, however, stood an organization that every major mafia family in America had learned to respect. Rivals feared his patience more than his temper, because Damian never acted without calculating every possible outcome. Those who underestimated him rarely lived long enough to regret it. Yet there was one battle even he had refused to fight: marriage. For years, powerful families had offered daughters, nieces, and granddaughters as potential wives. Every proposal came wrapped in promises of stronger alliances, political influence, or financial expansion. Damian rejected them all. He believed affection could be performed, loyalty could be purchased, but character only revealed itself when someone possessed unlimited power. That belief inspired an unusual challenge. Instead of arranging a traditional engagement, Damian announced that he would hand 4 unlimited black cards to 4 women. For 48 hours, each woman could spend as much money as she wished without seeking approval. He would not judge them by how much they spent, but by the vision behind every decision. The woman who demonstrated the greatest understanding of power, responsibility, and long-term strategy would earn the opportunity to stand beside him, not merely as a wife, but as an equal within an empire built on impossible choices. The announcement spread through New York's underworld within hours. Every mafia family discussed it. Every financial newspaper speculated about it. Even politicians quietly wondered which influential woman would become the future Mrs. Moretti. The first candidate arrived surrounded by attorneys and advisors. Vivian Sterling had inherited a powerful family fortune and possessed connections that reached deep into government circles. She believed influence was cultivated through relationships. Within minutes of receiving her black card, she began arranging private meetings with senators, judges, and influential donors. She viewed every dollar as an investment in future political protection. The second candidate, Camille Ashford, approached the challenge from a different angle. A celebrated corporate strategist, she immediately began negotiating the purchase of several struggling logistics companies that could strengthen Damian's transportation network. She rarely smiled, rarely wasted words, and treated every conversation like a boardroom negotiation. The third candidate, Naomi Sinclair, represented modern influence. She understood branding, public opinion, and international media better than anyone in the room. Luxury events, charity galas, celebrity partnerships, and high-profile investments quickly filled her schedule. In her mind, controlling public perception was just as valuable as controlling territory. The 3 women carried themselves with effortless confidence. They dressed in designer clothing. They traveled with personal assistants. Every entrance turned heads. Every decision attracted applause from Damian's advisors. Compared with them, The fourth recipient looked as though she had wandered into the wrong building. Helena Brooks stood quietly near the entrance of the mansion, still wearing the simple black and white uniform she used every day while cleaning the estate. Her hair was tied neatly behind her head. Comfortable shoes replaced expensive heels. Her hands carried faint traces of cleaning solution, despite repeated washing. She wasn't famous. She wasn't wealthy. She wasn't connected to any mafia family. She had worked inside the mansion for almost 6 years. Most people barely noticed her. Some barely acknowledged her existence. The younger guards often laughed whenever she pushed her cleaning cart through the marble hallways. "Careful," one joked. "Don't let her lean against the wall. She might knock the whole place down." Another smirked. Maybe the kitchen budget disappeared because of her. The remarks were cruel. The laughter came easily. Helena never responded. She simply continued working as though she hadn't heard a single word. Over time, the insults became part of the mansion's daily routine. Only one person seemed completely indifferent. Damien. He neither encouraged the mockery nor stopped it. Helena was simply another employee among hundreds. She cleaned offices before dawn, prepared conference rooms before important meetings, and quietly disappeared before executives arrived. If anyone had asked Damien to describe her, he probably would have remembered her dedication before her face. When the fourth black card was placed into Helena's hands, the atmosphere changed instantly. Several capos exchanged confused glances. One of Damien's senior advisors actually laughed. "A maid!" Another whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. "She'll probably buy groceries and call it a strategy." Even Vivian struggled to hide her amusement. Camille raised an eyebrow before returning her attention to financial reports. Naomi smiled politely, convinced the final card had been included merely to make the competition appear unpredictable. Helena stared at the sleek black card resting in her palm. She hesitated before speaking. "Mr. Moretti, I believe you've made a mistake." Damien met her eyes for only a moment. "I don't make mistakes." "I don't understand why you've chosen me." "You've spent 6 years watching people make decisions inside this house," he replied calmly. "Sometimes the person nobody notices sees the most." The room grew unexpectedly quiet. Helena nodded once. "I'll do my best." Unlike the other candidates, she left the mansion alone. No assistants, no security convoy, no photographers. She climbed into an old sedan that looked completely out of place beside the luxury vehicles parked outside the estate and quietly disappeared into afternoon traffic. Within the first hour, reports flooded into Damien's office. Vivian had scheduled meetings worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Camille was negotiating acquisitions across 3 states. Naomi had already secured partnerships that dominated entertainment headlines. Everything unfolded exactly as expected. Then another notification appeared. It belonged to Helena's card. The first transaction exceeded $12 million. The second reached $18 million. The third arrived less than 10 minutes later. No explanation accompanied any of them. Damien frowned. His chief financial officer checked the system twice, convinced there had to be an error. Instead, more alerts flooded the screen. 5 million, 8 million, 9 million. The total climbed relentlessly. 30 million, 42 million, 54 million. No luxury purchases appeared. No property records. No obvious assets. Only massive transfers executed with astonishing speed. The atmosphere inside the war room shifted from curiosity to alarm. Every capo stopped talking. The chief financial officer's voice trembled as another notification flashed across the monitor. "Boss," Damien slowly looked up. "The total has just exceeded $60 million. Silence consumed the room, every eye fixed on the screen. A senior capo slammed his fist onto the table. "I knew it. She used the competition to rob us." Another immediately reached for his radio. "Seal every exit from the city." A third didn't wait for permission. "Send tactical teams to find Helena Brooks." Damien's expression remained unreadable, but his voice turned ice cold. "Bring her back. No matter where she is." Outside the mansion, black SUVs roared through the gates as armed men scattered across New York, convinced they were hunting nothing more than an ordinary maid who had somehow stolen $60 million from the most dangerous man in America. By sunset, news of the missing $60 million had already spread through every level of the Moretti organization. No one questioned who had taken it. In their minds, there was only one possible answer: the Maid. Inside the mansion's underground war room, giant monitors displayed live updates from the black card system. Every transaction made by the 3 remaining candidates appeared organized, documented, and easy to understand. Vivian Sterling had spent nearly $20 million hosting private dinners with influential lawmakers and retired judges. Her goal was obvious. She intended to strengthen Damien's political shield before another federal investigation could begin. Several capos nodded approvingly. "Expensive," one muttered, "but useful." Camille Ashford had moved even faster. Instead of luxury purchases, she acquired controlling shares in 2 struggling logistics companies and a regional freight network. If the deals closed successfully, the Moretti organization would control nearly every major transportation route entering the eastern seaboard. The financial advisors applauded her vision. She's thinking 10 years ahead. Naomi Sinclair chose an entirely different battlefield. Within hours, she had purchased exclusive sponsorship rights for international sporting events, secured media partnerships, and begun negotiations to acquire a luxury hotel chain frequented by diplomats and celebrities. "Power follows reputation," she explained confidently. Several younger capos admired her strategy. For a moment, the competition looked exactly as Damien had imagined. 3 intelligent women, 3 completely different approaches to power. Then someone noticed the 4th account. Helena's black card had gone completely silent. No new transactions, no location updates, no communication. Nothing. 1 hour passed, then another. By midnight, she seemed to have vanished. A senior capo crossed his arms. "She's gone." Another scoffed. She knew she'd never compete with the others. 60 million was enough. Someone else laughed bitterly. The cleaning lady just pulled off the biggest robbery in Mafia history. The joke spread quickly around the table. This time, no one defended her. Not even Damien. He stared silently at the transaction reports. Something felt wrong. Not because the money was gone. Money could always be earned again. But because the spending pattern made no sense. Professional thieves hid transactions. Helena's purchases had been impossibly direct, almost as if she wanted someone to see them immediately. His chief accountant interrupted his thoughts. "We still can't identify what the money actually bought. No invoices? No. No registered assets? Nothing. No offshore transfers? Nothing." The silence deepened. One of Damien's oldest advisors finally stood. "We've wasted enough time." He looked directly at Damien. "Order the execution." Several capos immediately agreed. If she's innocent, she would have come back. She's running. Every minute we wait makes us look weak. Another senior lieutenant leaned forward. "Boss, every family in New York is watching. If someone steals $60 million from you and survives, your authority disappears." The room fell silent. Everyone waited for Damien's decision. His expression remained unreadable. Finally, he spoke. "Find her. If she resists..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Every man in the room understood exactly what he meant. Across New York, dozens of black SUVs flooded highways, bridges, airports, and private marinas. Every safe house connected to the Moretti organization received Helena's photograph. Every checkpoint doubled its security. Every trusted informant received the same order. Find the maid. Just before dawn, the radio on a tactical commander's shoulder crackled to life. We found her. The convoy changed direction immediately. Less than 20 minutes later, 4 armored vehicles surrounded an abandoned commercial building near the Brooklyn waterfront. The officers expected resistance. Instead, they found Helena calmly sitting alone inside a nearly empty office. A laptop rested on the desk. Several folders lay neatly stacked beside it. She didn't attempt to escape. She didn't even look surprised. The commander stepped forward cautiously. "It's over." Helena slowly closed the laptop. "I know." He frowned. "You knew we'd find you." "I expected you much sooner." The soldiers exchanged puzzled looks. One officer roughly grabbed her arm. "You've got a lot to explain." Helena quietly stood. "I do." She offered no resistance as plastic restraints tightened around her wrists. The convoy returned to Moretti Manor shortly after sunrise. Word spread before the vehicles even entered the gates. They found her. Servants abandoned their duties. Guards lined the entrance hall. Senior capos gathered inside the conference room. Everyone wanted to witness the downfall of the woman who had supposedly stolen from the boss. As Helena was escorted through the marble corridor, whispers followed every step. "I told you she'd run. Look at her. She doesn't even seem scared." Someone laughed. Maybe she spent the money on a final vacation. Another added loudly enough for everyone to hear. "She should have bought better shoes." The laughter echoed through the hallway. Helena kept walking. Her face revealed nothing. The conference room doors opened. Inside, every senior member of the organization had already taken a seat. Vivian, Camille, Naomi. They watched quietly from one side of the room. None of them smiled openly. They didn't need to. The outcome appeared inevitable. Helena was pushed toward the center of the room. The restraints remained on her wrists. Damien stood beside the long conference table. He looked at her for several seconds before speaking. "Where is the money?" Helena didn't answer. "Were you working alone?" Still nothing. A capo slammed both hands onto the table. "Answer the boss!" Another pulled out his pistol. "We don't have time for games." The room filled with angry voices. "She betrayed us. Make an example of her. End this." Only Damien remained silent. He watched Helena carefully. Fear had broken hardened killers before. Pressure had forced powerful politicians into confession. Yet the maid standing before him displayed neither panic nor desperation. She simply looked around the room, studying every face as though searching for someone. Finally, she turned back toward Damien. When she spoke, her voice was calm enough to make several people stop arguing. "I won't defend myself." The room quieted. "I won't explain where the money went." One capo laughed. "Because you can't." Helena ignored him. Instead, she looked directly into Damien's eyes. "I only need 10 minutes." No one moved. No one spoke. Then she finished the sentence that froze the entire room. "Give me 10 minutes. And I'll prove who really stole your empire." The conference room erupted instantly. Several capos shouted that she was buying time. Others demanded she be taken away immediately. One reached for his pistol again, but Damien raised a single hand. The room fell silent. He continued staring at Helena. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. "You have 10 minutes. No one spoke. The ticking of the antique clock on the conference room wall suddenly became louder than the voices that had filled the room only seconds before. Damien glanced at his watch. 10 minutes. Helena slowly raised her restrained hands. If you expect answers, these need to come off. Several capos immediately objected. It's a trick. She's buying time. Don't trust her. Damien studied her face for another moment before nodding once. Remove them. The plastic restraints fell onto the polished floor. Helena gently rubbed her wrists, but instead of stretching or relaxing, she walked directly toward the large digital display connected to the mansion's financial network. One of the security officers instinctively stepped into her path. She stopped. I'll need the screen. The officer looked toward Damien. Another brief nod. He stepped aside. Helena plugged a small encrypted drive into the system. Within seconds, dozens of files appeared. One capo laughed. So you prepared a slideshow? No one else laughed. Helena calmly opened the first document. Before anyone accuses me again, you should know something. The $60 million wasn't stolen. It was moved, the room erupted. Moved where? For what? Stop playing games. She ignored every interruption. Instead, she enlarged a financial chart. 3 months ago, someone inside this organization began selling information. Every head turned toward her. The buyer wasn't another mafia family. It was an international investment syndicate. Damien frowned. What information? Our shipping schedules. Our shell companies. Our cash movement. Our political protection. Our offshore accounts. Every sentence made the room quieter. One senior advisor shook his head. Impossible. Helena clicked another file. A map of the East Coast appeared. Red lines connected dozens of ports. Blue lines represented the Moretti organization's shipping routes. Several routes suddenly disappeared. They already know these routes. She clicked again. Another document appeared. Our warehouse locations. Another click. Our private security schedules. Another. The names of undercover accountants. Another. The identities of 3 confidential government contacts. This time, nobody interrupted. Damien's expression hardened. Who leaked them? Helena looked toward the far end of the table. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she opened an audio recording. The room filled with a familiar voice. Payment will arrive after tomorrow night's shipment. Moretti suspects nothing. Once he's gone, the organization collapses. Silence. Several capos stared at one another. Everyone recognized the speaker. Marco Vescari, one of Damien's oldest lieutenants. The man had served beside him for nearly 15 years, a loyal soldier, a trusted advisor, or so everyone believed. Marco immediately stood. That's fake. Artificial intelligence can clone voices. Several people nodded. Helena wasn't surprised. I expected you'd say that. She clicked again. Bank records appeared, then passport scans, then encrypted messages, each one linked to offshore accounts under false identities. Each one led back to Marco. His confidence faded. Still, he forced a smile. Forgery. Helena calmly opened another folder. This security footage came from Warehouse 9. The video began playing, late at night. Marco entered alone. Minutes later, 2 strangers walked inside. Neither belonged to the Moretti organization. Money changed hands. Documents changed hands. Marco left carrying nothing. The strangers left carrying everything. Nobody breathed. One capo whispered, "My God!" Marco slammed both fists onto the table. "You can't prove what was inside those folders." "I don't need to." Helena enlarged another image, a digital timestamp, the serial numbers of classified shipping manifests. The same numbers now appeared inside encrypted messages recovered from the buyer's servers. Every piece matched. Perfectly. Marco's face slowly turned pale. Damien never looked away from him, but Helena wasn't finished. The betrayal wasn't about money. She opened another presentation. Satellite photographs filled the screen. A private estate, several armed compounds, a convoy route. This was planned for tomorrow morning, she zoomed in. The convoy carrying Mr. Moretti. Several red circles appeared. Sniper position. Explosive device. Escape vehicles. One elderly capo stumbled backward. That's an assassination plan. Helena nodded. If Damien followed tomorrow's original schedule, he wouldn't survive the first 30 seconds. The room froze. Marco suddenly took one step toward the exit. Half a dozen guards instinctively reached for their weapons. "Don't move," Damien said quietly. Marco stopped. His breathing became heavier. Helena continued as though nothing had happened. The $60 million disappeared because I needed it, before Marco realized I knew. She displayed another series of contracts. I purchased every shell company he secretly controlled. Another click. I acquired the logistics firms he planned to use after the assassination. Another. I terminated every financial credit line connected to his network. Another. I froze 12 offshore accounts. Another. I transferred emergency funds to private military contractors already flying here. One of the younger capos looked confused. Private military contractors? They'll arrive in less than 40 minutes. Why? Because after Marco loses his money, he'll use violence. As if on cue, a security officer rushed into the conference room. "Boss!" Everyone turned. "What is it?" "Our perimeter team just intercepted 3 heavily armed vehicles approaching the estate." The officer swallowed. "They aren't ours." Several capos immediately grabbed their pistols. Helena quietly looked at Damien. "They're early." The room exploded into motion. Men shouted orders. Security feeds switched across every monitor. Outside, alarms echoed throughout the mansion. Damien remained perfectly still. His eyes never left Helena. "You already knew this would happen." I hoped I was wrong. Another officer burst through the doors. "Boss, the attackers just turned around." Everyone stared. "What?" They received some kind of message. "They're retreating." Confusion spread across the room. Helena calmly opened her final document. "I paid them." The sentence stunned everyone. "What?" "I contacted their employer 4 hours ago. I offered more than Marco could. I bought peace." Nobody understood. She explained without emotion. "If they attacked today, hundreds of people would die. So I gave them a better reason not to." One of Damien's oldest capos slowly removed his glasses. He looked at Helena as though seeing her for the first time. "You used $60 million to save the organization." Helena finally looked at Damien. "I didn't spend your fortune. I protected it." Silence settled over the conference room once again. This time, no one was laughing. No one called her the Maid. No one mentioned her weight. Across the table, veteran capos who had once dismissed her began exchanging uncertain glances. For the first time since she had entered the room, they weren't looking at a servant. They were looking at someone who had seen a conspiracy that none of them had noticed. Damien slowly turned toward Marco. His voice was calm. Almost too calm. "Tell me she's lying." Marco opened his mouth. No words came out. For nearly 10 seconds, no one moved. Marco Vescari stood frozen at the end of the conference table, his face drained of color. The evidence on the screen had destroyed 15 years of carefully built trust, yet the room was still trying to accept something even more unbelievable. The overweight maid everyone had ignored had uncovered a conspiracy that none of Damien's generals had seen. Then someone laughed. It wasn't Marco. It was Vivian Sterling. She slowly rose from her chair and folded her arms. "I'll admit," she said with a faint smile, "that was impressive." Every eye turned toward her. "But exposing one traitor doesn't make her qualified to stand beside the head of this empire." Camille nodded. "Exactly." She tapped a stack of acquisition documents resting on the table. "We're here because Damien wanted someone capable of building the future, not simply cleaning up a crisis." Naomi leaned back comfortably. "And let's not forget why this competition exists." She glanced toward Helena. "Choosing a wife requires vision, not luck." The three women spoke calmly, but their message was unmistakable. Helena may have saved Damien. She still didn't belong among them. Several capos quietly agreed. One whispered, "She's loyal." But loyalty isn't leadership. Helena remained silent. She looked at Damien instead. "May I respond?" Damien gave a slight nod. "You may." Helena walked toward the digital display once again. Instead of opening another financial report, she projected a satellite image of an enormous waterfront development. "This project belongs to Vivian." Vivian smiled confidently. "My new commercial district. It will generate influence for decades." Helena zoomed in. "It will also be underwater." The smile disappeared. "What?" Helena highlighted several engineering reports. The city approved this construction using flood risk studies completed 11 years ago. She opened another file. These reports were replaced 6 months ago. New satellite data appeared, sea level projections, foundation stress analysis, insurance estimates. If construction begins, the district will require nearly $400 million in structural reinforcement within 5 years. The conference room became quiet. One of Damien's engineers frowned. "I've never seen these reports." "You weren't supposed to. They were buried during the approval process." Vivian grabbed the tablet. Her confident expression slowly collapsed as she scanned the documents. "This can't be right," Helena answered softly. "It already is." Without another word, she switched to Camille's presentation. Several maps of transportation corridors appeared. The logistics acquisitions. Camille smiled again. "My strategy expands distribution across 3 states. It also creates 3 unnecessary bottlenecks." Helena overlaid another map. Different colors filled the screen. Rail lines, port congestion, fuel costs, federal inspection routes. "You focused on ownership. I focused on movement." She enlarged one section. "If these acquisitions proceed, every shipment entering this network becomes dependent on a single inspection corridor." One elderly capo immediately recognized the danger. A single federal investigation could freeze everything. Helena nodded. "Exactly." Camille stared silently at the calculations. For the first time since entering the mansion, she had no answer. Helena continued. "Finally, Naomi's media empire appeared on the screen. Luxury hotels, celebrity partnerships, international branding campaigns." Naomi smiled with practiced confidence. "Public influence wins wars before they begin." "It also attracts attention." Helena clicked once. A graph appeared. Another click. Federal investigations, media exposure, tax records, international compliance reports. "Your strategy assumes visibility creates protection." She looked directly at Naomi. "For legitimate corporations." "That's true. For a criminal empire. Visibility creates evidence." No one interrupted. Helena slowly closed every file before speaking the sentence that would define the entire competition. "None of you bought power." She looked toward Vivian. "You bought appearances." She turned to Camille. You bought expansion. Then Naomi. You bought attention. Finally, she faced the room. But expensive decorations are not the same as power. Silence. Complete silence. Every capo slowly understood what she meant. The three candidates had spent fortunes making the empire look stronger. Helena had spent the same money making sure the empire survived. Damien stood from his chair. His footsteps echoed across the room. He stopped in front of Vivian. The project is cancelled. She lowered her eyes. He turned toward Camille. The acquisitions are terminated. Camille closed her briefcase without protest. Finally, he faced Naomi. The media partnerships end today. No one argued. The competition had ended without anyone announcing it. Damien then looked across the room toward Marco. His voice became colder than anyone had ever heard. Take him. Marco suddenly lunged toward the nearest guard. The conference room exploded into chaos. A pistol slid across the floor. Another guard tackled him against the marble wall. Marco struggled desperately. You don't understand. They'll destroy all of us. Damien didn't blink. Cuff him. Within seconds, Marco disappeared beneath the weight of 4 armed guards. As he was dragged toward the exit, he shouted one final sentence. You'll regret trusting her. The heavy doors slammed shut. Silence returned. This time, no one spoke. One by one. Something remarkable happened. The oldest capo in the organization slowly stepped forward. For more than 30 years, he had answered only to Damien. Now he stopped in front of Helena, placed one hand across his chest, and bowed his head. I judged you by your uniform. I'm ashamed. Another capo followed. Then another. Soon, nearly every senior lieutenant stood before Helena. Some nodded respectfully. Others lowered their heads. Several quietly apologized for years of mockery she had endured without complaint. The younger guards who had once laughed at her weight couldn't even meet her eyes. Helena seemed almost uncomfortable. You don't owe me this. The elderly capo looked up. Yes, we do. We protected the boss with weapons. You protected him with wisdom. Across the room, Damien watched the scene unfold in silence. Only now did he remember countless mornings when he had entered perfectly prepared meeting rooms. Every document already arranged, every schedule already organized, every tiny detail handled before anyone noticed. He had assumed efficiency. He had never considered the mind behind it. He realized something painful. For 6 years, the most capable strategist in his entire organization had been standing only a few feet away, holding a mop instead of a seat at the table. Damien slowly approached Helena. The conference room instinctively fell silent again. He stopped directly before her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Damien said quietly, I almost had you executed. Helena didn't deny it. You did. And after everything, you still chose to save my empire. She gave a small, tired smile. It was never just your empire. It became my home long before anyone noticed I was there. Those words struck the room harder than any confession, because every person present suddenly realized the same truth. The woman they had dismissed as invisible had been protecting them long before they ever needed saving.
The conference room remained silent long after Marco Vescari had been dragged away. For years, Damien Moretti had believed that betrayal would come from a rival family, a corrupt politician, or a federal investigation. He had prepared for every external threat imaginable. He had never imagined that the greatest danger would be hidden behind the confidence of a trusted lieutenant, while the person who ultimately saved everything was the woman everyone had overlooked. Damien slowly walked toward the panoramic windows overlooking Manhattan. The city stretched endlessly beneath the morning light. Millions of people were beginning another ordinary day, unaware that one decision made inside this mansion had just prevented a criminal empire from collapsing into civil war. Without turning around, Damien finally spoke. "I've spent my entire life judging people." His voice was calm, almost reflective. "I judged loyalty. I judged intelligence. I judged courage." He paused before adding, "And somehow, I failed to judge the person standing closest to me." Helena said nothing. There was no triumph on her face. No satisfaction. Only quiet exhaustion. Damien turned toward her. "When did you realize Marco had betrayed us?" "Almost 4 months ago." A ripple of surprise moved through the room. One of the senior capos frowned. 4 months? Helena nodded. The numbers never matched. "What numbers?" Damien asked. "The cleaning schedules." Several people looked confused. She continued. Every executive meeting required the conference room to be prepared the night before. Every time Marco requested a last-minute room change, a shipment disappeared within 48 hours. The room fell silent again. I started comparing meeting schedules with financial records. She looked toward the accounting department. No one else noticed, because no one compared those two systems. Damien gave a faint, almost disbelieving smile. "You found a traitor, because you were cleaning the room. I found him because people stop hiding when they believe you're invisible." Those words struck everyone harder than any evidence she had presented. For years, executives had continued private conversations, while Helena dusted shelves or refilled coffee, because they never considered her important enough to notice. That invisibility had become her greatest advantage. Damien slowly approached until only a few steps separated them. "I owe you my life." Helena gently shook her head. "You owe me nothing. I owe you everything." She smiled sadly. "I didn't do it for a reward." "Then why?" For the first time since the crisis began, Helena hesitated. When she finally answered, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I didn't want your money." The room became completely still. "I wanted one chance." One chance. To prove that what people see isn't always what has value. I knew no one would ever invite me to this table. So I waited until the table needed me. Several capos quietly lowered their heads again. Not because she demanded respect, because they suddenly understood how often they had mistaken appearance for ability. Damien reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. The movement immediately caught everyone's attention. He removed a small black velvet box. No one spoke. He slowly opened it. Inside rested a simple platinum ring. It wasn't covered with oversized diamonds. It wasn't designed to display wealth. It represented something far more difficult to earn: trust. Damien looked directly into Helena's eyes. This ring was never meant for the richest woman. It was never meant for the most powerful family. It was meant for the person capable of protecting this empire when I could not. He held the ring in front of her. "I didn't choose you because you saved my life. I chose you because I finally understand your worth." The conference room waited in complete silence. Helena looked at the ring, then at Damien. She didn't reach for it. Instead, she asked one question. "If I accept, will you expect me to stand behind you?" Damien didn't answer immediately. She continued before he could speak. "I won't spend the rest of my life being another silent figure in the background. I won't become a decoration beside your throne. If I wear that ring, I'll stand beside you, not behind you." Every capo instinctively looked toward Damien. Years earlier, such a condition would have been unthinkable. The head of the Moretti organization answered to no one. Damien smiled for the first time that day. I wouldn't have it any other way. Helena finally extended her hand. Damien gently placed the ring on her finger. No applause followed. The moment was too meaningful for celebration. Instead, the oldest capo quietly stepped forward. Without being instructed, he bowed his head and respectfully kissed the back of Helena's hand. One after another, the remaining capos followed, not out of fear. Not because Damien ordered them, because they genuinely believed she had earned a place no amount of money could ever purchase. Even several guards who had once mocked her appearance approached with lowered eyes. One young guard struggled to speak. "I'm sorry. I laughed at you. I thought." Helena offered him a gentle smile before he could finish. "You saw what everyone else saw. Now choose to see differently." He nodded silently. A week later, representatives from every major mafia family gathered inside the Moretti estate for an emergency council meeting. Rumors had spread across the country. Some believed Damien had survived an assassination attempt. Others expected retaliation against Marco's allies. No one expected what happened instead. The enormous conference hall filled with the most influential figures in organized crime. As Damien entered, every conversation stopped. Then another figure appeared beside him, not several steps behind. Beside him, Helena wore an elegant dark suit instead of a maid's uniform. There were no expensive jewels except the platinum ring on her hand. Several visiting bosses exchanged puzzled looks. Some recognized her immediately. Others remembered only glimpsing her carrying cleaning supplies through these very halls. Damien waited until the room became completely silent. Then he spoke clearly enough for every person present to hear. "Many of you believe this woman saved my life." He paused. "You're wrong." Every eye shifted toward Helena. Damien continued. "She saved something far more valuable. My empire." He slowly looked around the room. "From this day forward, you will answer to Helena Moretti exactly as you answer to me." No one objected. No one questioned the decision. The evidence had already spoken louder than any title. One by one, the leaders of every family rose from their chairs. It wasn't required. It wasn't expected. Yet every single one of them stood in respect. Helena quietly looked around the room. Only days earlier, she had entered this hall before sunrise carrying a bucket, a mop, and fresh coffee for people who barely noticed she existed. She had never been allowed to sit at the table. Today, the same doors opened once again, but this time, no one waited for her to clean the room. They waited for her to lead it. And as Helena walked toward the chair beside Damien, the room remained standing, silently acknowledging that true power had never belonged to the loudest voice, the wealthiest family, or the most feared reputation. It had belonged all along to the person who asked for nothing except one opportunity to prove what she was capable of.